Hello, everybody. Joanna from Joanna Reads here. I'm so excited to be hosting this wonderful discussion on Return to Edan by our dear friend and author and booktuber, Philip Chase, who is here in the discussion with us. So if you are new to my channel or new to this discussion, I already have hosted a couple of discussions on this series. So our first discussion on book one was with Alan, who is Alan from the Library of Alexandria, that is, who is the audiobook narrator for the series, and Jimmy from the Fantasy Network, Merphy, and Philip. And then we had our book two discussion, which was The Prophet of Edan, which was with Philip and Merphy and Jimmy and me. And this time we're doing this again, but we're doing this for book three, but with slightly different people, as you can see here. So here I have returning to my channel, John from Talking Story. So hello, John. So glad to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here. I guess I'm either the budget Jimmy or the budget Alan. You can pick.
I think we got to go with budget Alan, given the size of Tom's arms.
Yeah, I was gonna say Tom is way closer to budget Jimmy.
Yeah. Just one Jim Bro for another one, you know.
Oh, I love it. Okay. And then, of course, and then joining us for the first time on my channel, I'm so excited to have Tom Orange here, who is wearing his theme color orange.
Yep.
Which beautifully blends with the background here of this video.
Yeah.
So yeah. I love Tom's channel. I love John's channel and Tom's channel so much, by the way. So I just want to go ahead and say I'm so happy they're joining us for this third Edan discussion. And I know that they love this particular series, so I'm excited to talk with them. And then also returning the wonderful Murph. Hi, Murph.
Hi. Oh, I forgot my name. Yeah.
But yes, Merphy Napier, who has two fantastic channels here on YouTube, one dedicated to manga and the other one dedicated to books. And so she's been joining for every single one of our Edan discussions so far. Happy to have you back, Murph.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and Philip Chase. So hello, Philip. Of course, you're not new to my channel, but I'm always so happy to have you here. And excited to talk about
happy to be here. And thank you for organizing this, Joanna. And also, I do want to, speaking of the devil, I do want to give a shout out to Alan because his narration of The Way of Edan is just about done. And I do expect it to be out in July, actually. So by the time this video is out, it'll probably be July. So yeah, this month, look for the audiobook of The Way of Edan as narrated by Alan from the Library of Alexandria.
I am so excited. I have heard a couple of excerpts of his audio narration, and I've been so impressed. So yeah, I hope
he's doing an amazing job.
He's going to be a hit. He really is.
Are you going to give him a 30-second break before he has to start book two?
20 seconds.
Yeah. No. Okay.
I guess I'm going to have to buy this for a third time. You know, have it in every format.
Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. So I guess we'll just go ahead and begin spoiler free to start out with. Just with general impressions about this book. And I'm going to start with John from Talking Story because he did give a pitch about this book, I think in his weekly update, and it was fantastic. So we're just going to have you repeat yourself.
Oh my gosh. I have to remember what I said. For me, the book delivered every way I wanted to deliver. After book two, which was far more action-oriented than I found book one, with just a little bit of a transcendental epiphany at the end. This kind of married what I loved about book one and book two together. You had the spiritual journey of Dayraven, yet you had all of the pulse-pounding, forward-moving plot resolution and actions, and such a bold choice to completely really end a trilogy at book two so you could start fresh and wipe the decks clean and kind of repopulate your game board, shuffle it all around, and examine what happens when this clash leaves a void and what people will do to fill that void. I found it just stunning. It was very bold. It delivered on every way I wanted it to. It really touched me personally in a lot of ways. A lot of baggage I'd personally been carrying, it addressed and spoke to me in that way. And it was just one of those rare times where you actually read a book and you set it down and you feel like you've learned a little bit something about yourself. Not just the characters in the world. So it was, I just thought it was everything I was hoping it would be in a book three.
Oh, wow. That's beautifully said. Philip, did you want to respond to any of that?
Oh, wow. John, you have a gift for describing how you feel about a reading experience. And I really appreciate that, that you read the book at all, honestly, and that I'm so happy that it resonated with you as well. I think you and I often probably are looking for a similar experience when we read. So I'm just glad it spoke to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
And just so you know, no one is pressured to say that they gushingly love the book. We could have critical thoughts too here, right, Philip? Because
absolutely, yeah,
I
can
John,
take
say
it.
what you hate now.
All right. Who wants to step up and say it was bad?
Look, as long as I didn't have another rock climbing scene, you know.
I'm not wearing a boot this time, so I'm a little bit less bitter.
Okay.
All right, and Tom, go ahead and share your impression.
Yeah, let's see if I can follow that up from John. Yeah, so when book 2 finished, I was so curious on where the story was going to go, because book 2 really did feel like how a lot of series would end. And so I really appreciated so much of this book, like exploring what happens after some of these like huge climactic events, because in so many series you get the big climax and then you just kind of imagine everybody's happy ever after. And I thought this book just did a great job of like wrapping everything up and showing, and this is kind of a whole trilogy kind of thing, but it still paid homage to so many like legends of the genre, and it had that comfy feel of fantasy while still exploring and moving forward and like showing what you can still do in this genre that I think a lot of people would say it's the same tropes over and over again. It's the same formula over and over again. And this book in particular really took and played with a lot of different things that I haven't seen in a lot of my reading. And so I just really enjoyed it. I thought you took some very bold things in this book, especially early on. I remember being just, I don't know, probably 15% of the way into this book and being like, I'm not sure if this is going to work out. I feel like there's so much that we have to do. And yeah. By the end of it, I was like, at the first I was like, do we have time for this? And then I was like, oh, we definitely have time for this. We can take as long as we need with this because it was fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of, it all just worked together so well and just was a great ending to the trilogy.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Yeah. I mean, I was actually more afraid of the reception of this book than the other two because of the risks that you were talking about. I was thinking, am I just nuts for trying this?
At first, I thought you were, to be completely. Yeah. I remember being. I was reading it and just like, wow, okay, this is bold. We'll see if it, hopefully it sticks the landing, and it did, which is great. But I remember specifically being like, we'll see, but it was.
I'm so glad it worked for you. Really, yeah.
I feel like you're psychically connecting on what that thing is, and we'll get there once we get into spoilers. But first, Murph, what were your thoughts?
So much like Tom, I felt like I knew where this was going. I was like, yeah, I know what book 3 will be, and it's going to be fun. It'll be a good time. And there were so many things that I was like, well, I didn't see that coming. Okay, I didn't expect that move. Okay, well, I didn't think we were going to go there. So a lot of surprises came from this, a lot of really cool surprises, especially the last quarter of this book. I really, really love Sequara, and we'll talk about it in the spoiler section. I want more. I want more Sequara. I would have so much of her story that I just wanted to keep digging into, which is a good thing, to love a character that much. But it's a very slow sections. Tom, you mentioned cozy. There's a lot of very cozy slice of life moments, and then a lot of fast action. So there was a lot going on.
Mm-hmm. Philip, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I am thrilled to hear you say that you like Sequara, Murph. That's music to my ears. She's a favorite of mine too, and in many ways, I feel like she's she and Saren were really the characters that sort of pulled me along in this story. I felt like while I was writing it, and I tried my best to explore their journeys. And I am, by the way, just this is a little aside, but I am working on a sequel right now, and there will be characters there that I hope that you'll be happy to see again.
More Sequara!
Yes. All right. And as for myself, I will echo what Merphy said about Sequara, because I think that I could have used so much more of her. But then when she did come into the scene, I think her conflicts were very clear, and there's a lot to be said about her. She was a character that I feel like I could recognize her. I understood her. As far as this book is concerned, I didn't finish until last night. I actually held off. I've been reading it
I
for a
finished it
long
last
time.
night too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And I
So
did
it's
that on
fresh.
purpose. I did on purpose because I wanted to be very fresh with my reactions to the end. And I have to say, Philip, that the last 2 chapters of this book were probably my favorites in the entire series. I think it wrapped up so beautifully. I also was really impressed because, as Tom mentioned, again, echoing that idea about cozy and traditional, I think something that stood out to me in this series overall, and I noted this in book 2, even in the title of my review of that, is that this book does seem to go between very sweet and cozy and very cozy,
Hopeful.
warm.
Super hopeful.
Yes, very hopeful, found family connections. You have scenes like that alternating with scenes that are very grim and gory and gross. And there's a lot of that in book 2 as well, I would say. But what I found impressive in this book was, especially in the last quarter of the book, I felt like the tone blended quite a bit more for me. I do have a lot of questions, so I'm sure we can get into that in the spoiler section. But before I do that, is there anything you want to share with us?
Oh, no, really. I mean, I'm so happy that you guys read this. Thank you so much. And thank you, Joanna, for hosting this, and all of you for being here. And that you felt that the last 2 chapters were your favorite. Hey, it's really the best thing is to end on a high, really.
Yeah.
So I'm better to have a good ending and then to have a good beginning and not a very good ending, right? So I really feel like that's wonderful, because I was talking with Ed and Will, the Gwynn brothers, and I think one of them, I think it was Ed, mentioned that the people tend to remember your series for the last book more than for the earlier books when they read the whole series. So for you to say that your favorite chapters were the last couple, it makes me very happy, actually. So, but thank you all, really.
Yay, fantastic. So I guess we're going to go ahead and enter into spoiler territory now. So if you've watched this far and if you haven't finished the series or you haven't started, here's your chance to get off this stream and maybe return after you finish the series. But all the books are now published. Audiobook for book 1 coming soon again. And now we're into spoilers. So anything spoilery anyone wants to say about the very beginning before I ask my first question?
Go for it, Joanna.
Yeah, I think we all have the first question. I
Okay.
think we all have the same question. Yeah.
I don't know if everyone does. I just want to understand the elf a bit more. I just have so many questions about this elf, especially because at the end of book 2, we note that the elf takes over Dayraven's consciousness. He no longer remembers anything. And then his hair changes color. It turns silver. Is that correct? Was it silver or white? I can't remember.
Yeah, silvery white. Yeah.
Yeah. Right away, I thought, is that a nod to Gandalf the White?
Not consciously, but I don't mind that association. I mean, in this case, the author can be comfortably dead, and your interpretation of that, I like it a lot. I had never thought of it, to be honest, but I like it. It's just an outward sign of an inward transformation as well, is what that signifies to me, anyway. That his hair turning color. And that's, by the way, that's a real thing. Sometimes when people go through very stressful situations, their hair turns gray in a matter of days. That can actually happen to people.
All the way? Or just the roots?
It can get, well, I think the roots probably.
Okay. I was like, wow.
I'm so scared.
Yeah, I think it would just be the roots. I'm not a doctor, but I've heard of it. You can look it up on the internet or something. But I'm sure it's in Wikipedia.
So how is the elf changing Dayrhaven? Because obviously he's struggling with the elf inside his head. He's struggling remembering who he is. Little by little, he comes back to himself. But I guess he also becomes this prophet who speaks to the Torlanders about peace, love, and unity, and seeing a cross and seeing the other as you. Is that how much of that is influenced by the elf? So I guess I was wondering about that internal transformation and how much of that is influenced by the elf. And yet at the same time, there's a lot of conversation in this book about the elf wanting to annihilate everyone to bring them peace and the
Right.
elf being indifferent. And I guess I'm just seeing all these different conversations in the book about the elf and trying to put it together to understand
Sure.
fully. Because it seems to me like that I got the impression for a while there that maybe that prophet part of Dayrhaven was attributed to the elf in some way.
Yeah, I think the feeling that people have when they're around Dayrhaven arises in great part because of the elf. That's for sure. So that aura, the effect that he has on people is much to do with the presence of the elf within him. However, there's a difference of perspective between the elf and Dayrhaven. The elf, if you could put yourself in the position of an ethereal being that is looking outside and to at humanity, and looking at in a completely in a place of indifference, a place of kind of a cosmic perspective, I guess. You'd look at humanity, you'd look at our interactions in this world, our interactions with each other, and you probably would see a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. You would see that humanity has done a lot of bad things, a lot of destructive things. And from that ethereal position, you might conclude that the rest of the world would actually be better off. That the humanity is kind of like a cancer on in this world. You might conclude that humanity is better to be expunged, right? How do you get rid of all this suffering? Well, if you get rid of the source of all the suffering, then the world will be in balance again, right? So that's a perspective that you might think to be logical from that being's point of view. Dayrhaven is human, and he is struggling to assert a different perspective, even while this overwhelming presence is within him. His heroism, in my mind, lies in his assertion that humanity actually is capable of love, that we are capable of compassion, that we are capable of overcoming our tribalism, and that we are capable of connecting with one another in a way that is loving in this world. And that's his heroism. And he's saying to the elf, no, it's not our place to take away these lives. They are capable of transcending, and we have to allow that. We have to allow them that opportunity to live and to learn. So that, to me, is the struggle that is going on, and I think it's a legitimate question about humanity when you look at our history and you look at the pain and suffering that we have inflicted on each other and the world around us. So Murph has a question.
I have two questions.
Okay.
So if what you just described, is that why the elf accepted his sort of sacrifice at the end and they compromised the bargain because of Dayrhaven's display of love and sacrifice?
I think that's a very good way of looking at it. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Follow-up question, how does that resolve the conflict of humanity is oftentimes at fault for suffering? Because regardless of humans displaying that they're capable of love and sacrifice,
Right.
they're still capable of great evil. So nothing's really fixed.
Yeah, I don't think it resolves it. I think that it has to be enough for the moment, I suppose, just that assertion that we are perhaps redeemable, that we do have this potential to overcome. And this is honestly my hope for our species, is that we do overcome our tribalism. I think if we don't, then we're doomed as a species. That's my personal feeling. But I think we can do it. I have faith. I have hope. So I hope that this series does end on a hopeful note in that sense. I think John had a reaction there, maybe.
Yeah, I think I just want to weigh in on this because that was one of the things that hit me so powerfully towards the end. Dayraven, the Dayraven's connection with the elf is singular. He truly is a chosen one in the way that he chose himself. Dayraven is the raven that led himself to the elf. He gave up of himself. He sacrificed his life in this way because only Dayraven, with his compassion and empathy, could have been a vessel that we saw very well when Joramun took the elf on. Only Dayraven could have held out this long because of his compassion and his understanding. So even though he's emanating this power, which makes him have the gravitas of the prophet needed, only his humanitarian teachings basically pushed forward. He had to give himself up because he is the chosen one. He's operating on this level of compassion and empathy that would allow him to channel this power and give us a choice. And we see that come to fruition several times through the book. You see the Torlanders start to have some consciousness of, I'm not going to follow that order. That's not a moral order. I'm going to draw a line in the sand. You see Erkenwald, who's a complete hedonist, sociopathic character, when he starts to have empathy and compassion forced upon him, understand what his choices have done, the consequences of those choices, and then he has a very poetic come up. And so there is an absolute hopeful ending because this chosen one took this power on that only he could channel in this way. He did change humanity. A story can change humanity. Dayraven's story can change humanity by those people, singular people he touches, and then overall how they touch others, and the ripples in a pond effect. So while we can't have a happy ending of, and the world was forever changed and everyone lived happily ever after, I think it's way more complex and nuanced than that. We do have a happy ending because we've seen humanity changed by the contact of one person to another.
Yeah,
I think that's well said. I guess what I'm trying to understand and maybe put together, and tell me if this is accurate, Philip, is the idea that, well, maybe I should add first that John brought up the great point about the raven, which makes the story somewhat circular. But at the same time, I did feel like the elf was part of his epiphany. His part did have a part to play in Dayraven seeing there could be more than what was ordinary or what was considered normal in the world. And I guess that was in book 2 more than anything. Whenever he went into that Song of Origins realm, it seems like the elf was revealing, look at how much we can expand and transcend. And then Dayraven coming back is trying to convey that message to others. But I can't help but credit the elf a little bit for that. So.
Yeah. The elf does enable Dayraven to learn a new perspective, to transcend himself. Now, the struggle is between, and I'm talking about the elf as if it's an individual entity, that it has feelings or something, but the struggle is between that elf's perspective and Dayraven's perspective. Their conclusions, let's say, are different from that perspective. And it's the combination of the two of them, really. I think you're right, Joanna. It's the combination of the two of them that bring about the prophet of Edan. And it's Dayraven's humanity and his empathy and his compassion that channel the elf's power and perspective into this message of forgiveness and love. And that I think it never could have happened without the elf as well. So I think that you're absolutely right, that the elf gets some credit as well, for sure. Yeah.
Even though it's an assassin elf.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because the elf obviously has this vision and yet is somewhat nihilistic because the elf doesn't
I mean, from our perspective, I suppose.
From our perspective. Maybe.
Yeah.
I definitely view the elf as somewhat evil because it wanted to kill people, take over Dayraven. Dayraven constantly had to fight it. It bargained. It, to me, oftentimes came off as like a force that must be stopped, as opposed to, I don't know.
A more ethereal, compared to just being like more of an ethereal, just like it is what it is. It doesn't have like malice or
Yes.
I definitely felt that it was more on, and that you could maybe argue like the perspective of a human would see that as evil, and you could maybe get into that. But it definitely did seem like it had like a pretty clear goal, and it was on that spectrum of not good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got more of that kind of vibe than like this otherworldly thing that is just solely observing, and it doesn't like we're ants. It doesn't actually care about us. Like we're so small and insignificant. I felt like it definitely had more of it did care. It did have a way that it thought things should be. Yeah.
I
I'm with
agree.
you on
I
that.
think
Yeah.
it came across pretty clearly that it did have a motivation. Daywraven was able to bargain with it, and it also had a motivation to go back to its home, and it had the motivation to take over corpses and to slaughter, which is
Right.
In addition to the elf changing Daywraven, Daywraven changes the elf.
Okay.
And
Yes.
when the elf possesses Yoramon, he changes the elf. And when it possesses the Ilarchai, they change it. So it's kind of learning as well, I suppose you could say, as it goes along from the humans that it interacts with too. So there is another side to that.
Okay, yeah, because I was curious on with Joramon, it seemed like he was on his way to an epiphany himself, and then the elf kind of gets introduced, and it's like a coin, or the switch is flipped, and so is that maybe he wasn't ever, was he not sincere with that transformation? Or was it more of a he just never got all the way there? He was still kind of on that progression, and because of that blending of the elf at the time it happened, it wasn't the right time, right place kind of thing, and you kind of got the worst of both coming together and everything happening from there.
Yeah.
Same question.
Yeah, I would say that he believed he was sincere, for sure. He clearly wasn't as ready as he thought.
Sure, yeah.
Because he is reminded when Morcar and Edulf come in the door, and he's reminded of himself in a sense, and that induces a certain amount of fear and anger and regret and other emotions that he wasn't quite ready for. And his control slips, and boom, he's gone. Really,
right? Yeah,
that's what is supposed to happen when you encounter an elf. Daywraven was the first person ever to survive that, and Yoramon was the second, but he didn't last very long.
I love the Yoramon character in that moment, because it's even from book one setting him up as a different voice in the church. He's far more of an academic. I mean, he's a dichotomy to bloodline. Like, he feels like the church has a place in society, but it's far more of an academic pursuit that he's on. So at the end, when he has this power foisted on him, there's a certain lack of faith that he does not possess. He's not able to give himself to that moment, and I mean, it's not a happy scene for the two dudes that walked in the door.
Yeah.
I really liked a question that came up for me, or a theme I saw in the interaction with Yoramon and Daywraven, is that whenever Daywraven changes Yoramon for that moment, makes him face himself.
Yeah.
It seemed like it got Yoramon to feel this sense of unworthiness that he had never experienced, or maybe he was repressing from himself. And instead he went towards ambition. Everything with Yoramon was ambition, ambition, ambition. And he was able to silence any sense of empathy towards others in the pursuit of this ambition. And it made me think about the contrast between shame and ambition, because it seemed like when he had no shame, he was able to be very ambitious. But when he felt shame, when he felt unworthy, he lost that motivation temporarily. And that was ironically what made him feel like, once he felt like he wasn't worthy of Elf, that was the moment that he was gifted the Elf. Yeah. Would you like to talk about that, Philip? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you said it very well. And Yoramon is a character that I tried to write in a way that he would come across as complex and conflicted. There are some aspects of him that I myself identify with very strongly. And then there are other aspects of him that I feel like he's an arrogant idiot, and he is exploitative. And I think, though, a lot of that comes from a place of pain. I try to give a sense of this is a person who's been traumatized by the loss of his mother when he was, I think, 11. And that's something he keeps playing with, that ring on his little pinky finger. And that's his mother's ring, so I hope somebody that readers will feel some identification with, and at the same time, a bit of frustration or even repugnance at times because of what he does and how he interacts and how he convinces himself that his goal trumps morality, that it's okay for him to do what he does to, say, Bagsack or even Kolberga, who, yeah, okay, she was going to kill him, but still, does that make what he does right? I don't think so. And I think he realizes that after his interactions with Dayraven. And that's, again, as you said before, Joanna, I think it's both Dayraven's kindness and his empathy, his compassion, and it's the elf's ability to open up people and make them see themselves that transforms Yoramon into something that might have even come close to being capable of being unselfish. In that final moment, when he takes that burden from Dayraven, it's no longer, I need this power for myself so I can achieve my great goal. It's, I need to do this for the sake of humanity. I need to do this for my friend who's about to die here. He is acting genuinely compassionately in that moment. Yeah, that's right. And Dayraven is not a perfect being by any means. He makes mistakes. One of them might have been allowing Yoramon to take that power.
I was going to ask that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another, honestly, I feel.
Surprise.
Sorry?
That was
Go
a
ahead.
surprise.
Yeah. Good, I think. So another moment where I feel he makes a mistake, even though there's a part of me that is like, yes, is when he dumps all that those experiences into Erkenwald's brain and makes him empathetic. You can't make someone empathetic, I think. I'm afraid that it's just, a person has to choose to be compassionate. You can't make someone be compassionate. And that doesn't have a happy ending. What he does to Erkenwald is ultimately, it leads to more tragedy. So I think that was also, he was trying to create a situation where he could help the people who were being oppressed to no longer be oppressed, and to help the oppressors to see what they're doing and therefore stop and maybe even try to atone for what they had done. But you can't make someone compassionate.
I think, yeah, that's the difference, I would say, is that in this case, I think he does force characters to be empathetic in the sense that he's forcing them to see what they're doing, to put them in other people's shoes, to see through other people's eyes, including those that he has hurt.
Yeah.
But you can't make people compassionate, which compassion takes empathy a step further, which is not just feeling what others feel, but wanting that to release them from suffering.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that you can't really change in a person. It's one of the things that I took with me when I watched Clockwork Orange so many years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Yoramon? Tom, Murph, thoughts on Yoramon?
Go ahead, Tom. You haven't talked a lot.
Yeah, I did find him to be very interesting throughout the series. But anytime you have a character who is affected, like he was with his mother's death, like I think that's something that so many people can relate to, because it is such a traumatic thing for so many people. And I think even in real life, you give people so much grace when they are going through like the grieving process and things like that. You let the people, push boundaries that if they weren't going through something traumatic or, experiencing the sadness that you want to do. And so taking him as that character, using that as his motivation and having him just push it to like the farthest extreme, I think it worked really well. And it did make him feel like a character he wasn't just like pure evil. There are so many times that a character's evil because they're evil. And for him, he was able to use that to justify everything. And you can kind of go back and see those threads and just understand where that person is coming from in that situation. And I think that's, makes a character much more complex and more interesting to read, because it's so easy to just be like, well, they're just kind of a bad guy, he just is. But when you have those motivations and have those feelings, especially ones you can relate to, like you can with losing like a parent or something like that, I think it's just makes him much more interesting than if he was just another generic bad guy because he wanted power. He just wanted to be better than everybody else. I think that makes it interesting.
Very utilitarian, right? So like everything was a means to an end, and it was for the idea of like humanity transcending death.
Yeah, I agree, Joanna. I think that doubt is a good thing. And I've always felt that Yoramon, if he had been alive in our world today, would be probably like a scientist or something. And I had the opportunity to study when I was doing my undergraduate degree with some really great scientists. And I love remembering how they told me, we have to have a certain level of humility to do this thing well. Yes, we do our best to articulate what we think is going on or what we think happened. But the fact of the matter is, we're always getting new evidence, and then we have to revise what we think happened, and that involves a certain amount of humility.
Yeah.
And that's what Yorman lacked, was that humility, and part of it was coming from his pain, honestly. So it's I feel for him. In fact, I actually feel for him.
Yeah. I would say the scientists I admire the most are those who are willing to say, "Oh, I was wrong.
Yep.
This claim I made turned out not to be true." Or
That's right.
Yeah.
John's had his hand up.
John.
Yorman's my favorite. One of my absolute favorites because, and I don't know if this was purposeful on you or not. I see so many parallels to Christopher Marlowe's Faustus and this character.
Yes.
Like, it is such an enormously Faustian arc. Like,
yep,
just almost beat for beat.
Thank you. That's actually very much deliberate on my part. And every Marlowe play features a character that overreaches. And it's a thing that obviously Marlowe was fascinated by.
Yeah.
Most of the time, so with Faustus, in his original, as the play begins, he's done a lot of great things with his life.
And he wants to do more. The whole bargain is so he can do more. And that's
Right.
it mirrors in all of your characters. Like Tom said, they don't wear a black hat. They think they're doing the absolute best they can do.
Right. Yeah, with the exception of Erkenwald, do I just see him as more or less a narcissist, and I don't like that character. But even with characters like Bledla, Bledla believed what he was doing was not just correct, but was the morally right thing to be doing. That he was saving people. That's what Bledla believed in his heart. He was ready to sacrifice himself in order to achieve that. So, but Erkenwald, he's just a narcissist.
I'm going to speak in favor of Erkenwald when we get there. I'll keep my powder dry, but I'm going to do it.
That's going to be interesting.
Run with it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I watched you with the Brothers Grimm, and you said, I don't like this character. I can't connect to him. It's like, I thought this character was so enormously important for me because, I'm sorry. I'm encoded down to my DNA to be not a nice guy sometimes, and I have to look at myself in the mirror and understand I have had these thoughts. It's only through that kind of self-awareness that we can transcend, right? You have to have it. All your characters have to have the spectrum of humanity, with Erkenwald all the way on this side. And I understand you say, it was a mistake. It didn't work out well, but it was still poetic, and it was the right ending for him.
Yeah.
As a social mirror, we have to have that character. I have to go, yeah, I've had thoughts. Yeah, they're pretty. Yeah, I've been there. That's a dark neighborhood. I walked down that alley. I have to have Erkenwald to do that. I have to see him get his comeuppance. I have to see him have his epiphany of empathy, if not compassion, the way Joanna so beautifully put it, for the entire spectrum to come together and work. Which that's why I thought he was such an enormous character, and I do connect with him. I have to be self-aware enough to understand it may be all the way down to my DNA to want to circle up what I think is mine, and the rest can, it's like they're those darkest points of humanity. If we don't grab a hold of them and accept them as ourselves, we'll never get past. And I thought Erkenwald was so enormously powerful and important for that.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Good.
That was beautifully said. I'm enjoying watching you fanboy.
Yeah. Same. All right. I guess next point, I'll go ahead and lead us into the next topic. I would love to talk about Bagsack and Saren. I want to almost talk about them together because I loved the intersection between these two characters before. I guess I will talk about both of them, though, because I mean, obviously, Saren is on the cover of the book. And I have to say, I was proud of myself looking back, because at the end of our book 2 discussion, I thought I embarrassed myself royally by predicting that this was Emar's sister. Because I said that. I said, oh, my prediction, this is Emar's sister.
Not
and
far
then
off.
you said,
Niece.
and you were,
Yeah.
and I looked back at our old discussion, and you were like, she's too young. If you think about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's dumb. But anyway, I wasn't too far off.
Yeah.
And with the introduction of this character, she sings, which is lovely. I love the music part of that.
I thought of you, Joanna, when
Yeah.
I was thinking.
Yeah.
I wonder what will Joanna will think of Saren singing.
Easy way to win your way into my heart.
Yeah.
If you put song into your books, which obviously you already did.
Abin, yes, yeah.
Abin with Abin and with Saren, she was obviously a very innocent character who goes through some horrible tragedies at the beginning of this book. But Saren was a really, really bright introduction to the series, a bright character in the series, bright star in the series, and she's one of the characters again that give me like the cozy vibes. Deals with some horrific trauma. She survives a horrible illness, and then I think that she still brings so much hope and light to those that she's around, including Edgeleaf, and of course to Njorn and Orvindil and all the people she interacts with. But oh man, I have to say that my favorite was when she interacted with Bagsack. Just for some reason, I thought this is a really cool blend of that cozy, sweet, wholesome, hopeful vibe, and then Bagsack, who escaped from the prison with the chamber pot, talking about like gore, vomit, feces, like the whole 9 yards there.
Quickly say, just real quick.
Go ahead.
I love that you called Saren a bright star because her name Saren is from Welsh and it means star. So.
Aww.
Wow.
Yay.
Look at Joanna nail it.
I might have heard you say that before too.
Oh, come on. No, should have just taken it, Joanna.
But I will say that there's a character in Malathan named Saren as well.
Which I didn't realize at the time, but I'm actually happy with that coincidence. So,
yeah. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was just gonna say when we were introduced to her as a character, that is the part of this book that I was like, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to introduce a whole new character who, at first I thought she was maybe going to just be a very brief introduction about like some of the things that are going on in the world. And then obviously it becomes pretty clear quickly that she's going to be a decent part of this book. And I remember reading it and just being like, I don't know. This is a very bold move to introduce a character who is who looks like they're going to be very important moving forward. How am I supposed to get attached to a character when I already have all these other characters that, I'm attached to? I want to see what happens with their storylines and everything. And she ended up being my second favorite character in the series. And I just want to commend you because that's such a hard thing, I think, to pull off, of introducing somebody, have them go through everything that they go through and just like skyrocket up my enjoyment of reading them. And she's just such a fantastic character. I really enjoyed all of the horrible stuff. It's weird to say this, but I enjoyed seeing her go through all of these horrible things, but still being like, having that like bright, bubbly soul that she has, like to not get beat down and like give up and everything with from the plague stuff, everything that happens to her family. And probably even before we even meet her as a character, she's probably been dealing with, enemy troops being awful this whole time. Obviously we have like the rebellion group that her brother's a part of and everything that's going on with that. And so just for her to still be this like bright-eyed girl still pushing through even through all this tragedy, it's just a beautiful thing to see, and it does help keep that light going, and it's just just awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. And I kind of, the whole metaphor for that is when she swims through that narrow tunnel, and that's of course set up in the very beginning when she's that was when it happens later and it's all tied back together. I was like, oh, this is so great. To be honest,
I hadn't thought about that. That's such a good point. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, she's swimming through that dark tunnel and is just determined to get through it. And that may be the single greatest example of heroism in the entire book. Really, is her determination to get through that tunnel.
I mean, we wouldn't have won. It wouldn't have been resolved without her doing that.
Yeah. But I in her case, I really feel like I can't take credit entirely for her character because she just sort of took me by my shirt and said, "Here, buddy, this is where you're going with this story." I honestly feel that way. Like she told me where to go. And I had to follow. If you're writing your story and suddenly a character just seizes you and says, "No, this is where you're going," you need to listen, and Saren did that for me. So
I just had a revelation just now about Saren.
yeah,
And tell me if I'm wrong about this, Philip. I just saw her role differently in this moment. So, Raven, like I said, he had a moment to self-sacrifice earlier on in this book. He didn't take it, and he also learns that his lover Sakara is pregnant, and he has this vision or this dream of his daughter or his future child. I think daughter. So he's imagining himself in this role of being a father, and I can't help but wonder now, were his interactions with Saren, was that part of what made him kind of hopeful and want to hold on?
oh for sure,
Maybe it was him. I didn't make that connection till just now.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, for
wow.
sure.
Y'all pretty much covered Saren, but I'll just note that probably the thing that made me the most connected to her was the fact that she was very timid, very gentle, very meek, very soft and sweet, but also her determination.
Yes.
I was too thinking about the tunnels, swimming through the tunnels and getting to Day Raven, and just she would not give up. And I think
Yeah.
that that's true of her just as a person in any scenario she's in. Her tenacity met with that meekness and that gentleness, I think, is a combination that I just really, really loved.
Mm. Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah, she's. I don't know. I mean, I am a father of 2 daughters, so I have to think that that helped me somehow to write this character, and just coming from the depths of somewhere inside me. But yeah, she's. I'm glad that she appeared in this story for sure.
Yeah. And she shows that determination several times. You know, not just go through the tunnel, but she was supposed to stay back and be safe, and then no, she has to follow. You know, because of the loyalty. I have a question real quick. Is I was just like Tom, like when I started, and it's like this is the end. Like, where are we going to go? And I started. It's like, well, who are these people, and where are we now? You know, like what? You know, come on, I want my ending.
Come on, Philip.
Come on, and then I felt silly. To tell me if it was a happy. You say the character took you by the shirt and say, this is where we're going. Structurally, though, this is so amazingly tight. To start with a whole new beginning like that, and then your Aristotelian arc for the trilogy and for this one book come all the way back around, back to the beginning where we're at the crossroads. She has the little swim competition, and then it factors in with this dark tunnel, and then she's actually present in these earlier books, even though we don't know it because she's the niece. So this Aristotelian arc that completes itself as a snake eating its tail. If it's a happy happenstance where she grabbed you and pulled you, where did all the clean structure to give us these satisfying endings
He
come
spent
from?
so many years on this, John. He had new vision.
He says this was just
He made it cohesive.
You know, it's actually an interesting question. I feel because yeah, Murphy's right. I had the ability to make revisions. There were certain things that I did know though from the beginning, like the Raven thing. I knew that that's where I was going to go with that eventually. I knew that Raven, from the very moment that it led him into the forest, I knew that was Day Raven himself leading himself into this. As far as Saren goes, and I don't know how that happened, and how it just. I wish I could say, yeah, I had this genius plan and I intended all of this from the start. I really do feel that sometimes when you're in the midst of something creative, that sometimes it just takes you itself. It sweeps you away. Joanna's talked about flow before on her channel, and I feel like there are moments writing when there's just this flow, and I don't know where it's coming from, but it just worked out. And having her at the end have this mantra as she's trying to get to Day Raven and going through this dark tunnel saying, just like Crag Isle, just like Crag Isle, just like Crag Isle. And then finally, when she gets to the end, that was nothing like Crag Isle.
Oh, that's so true. I want thoughts on Bagsack. Do you all think there was a little bit of a redemption arc for this character?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead, John.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Tom, do you want to say anything about Bagsack? Or?
Yeah. So I once again the horrific things that happened to him. I enjoyed reading that because it makes the ending of it so much better. Where he's like that whole arc with him, especially because he was a character early on I didn't like. He's he's, you know, a bad guy for all intents and purposes, at least to me, for the most part. The way he acted, I didn't enjoy the way he treated people. There was a lot of things with him that I just didn't like, and so him getting his comeuppance and kind of being used in a horrific way made me feel for him, because just because somebody did something bad doesn't mean I necessarily want something bad to happen to them. And I feel like the writing itself about how he felt less whole and like there's just something missing from him was just a really powerful thing in of itself, because you know, when people lose something that makes them feel whole, like nothing can be worse than that. When you feel like something is actually missing from you, that nothing can be worse than that. I do just think that some of the scenes, like from a writing perspective, were just super well done, creepy. Like when he is escaping and he's going through and just everything, it was just super, super well done. I did find it like where he's just like in the gutter and trash and everything to just be very interesting, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen with him and how he was going to come around and be useful. I didn't know if when he was first living in the gutter and everything, I was like, are we going to like legitimately throw this character away now? That was where my first first thoughts went to with him. And I thought that, I was like, that doesn't seem like what's going to happen, but how fitting would it to be for this character to go through everything and then literally be left in the trash? That would just be a wild thing to happen. But yeah, he warmed to me because of everything that happened to him. You know, if he had just started to change his mind, I don't know if it would have felt like the same reward as him going through all of this trauma and everything to then be the character he is at the end.
Yeah.
Murph, do you want to add anything about Bagsack? Really well said, Tom.
Yeah, Tom said it perfectly. As far as what you said about, at first you were like, are we really throwing this character away? Yeah. I found his chapters early on very jarring, because we had, you know, Dayraven with his inspiration and his you know, vision for the future, delivering his speeches. We had Saren and her amazing, you know, arc that we got to see her on. We had Zaquara dealing with her trauma and dealing with leadership and her feelings for Dayraven. And then we had Muckenmeyer and Gore. And I was just like, every time I'm just like, the total shift was like, what are we doing? And it took me most of the book to finally be like, oh, okay, this is coming together. Like, we're good. But it was like whiplash almost every time we got another Bagsack chapter.
Yeah, it's like rather than the shit hit the fan, it's like the shit hit the floor.
the shit hits Bagsack
everywhere with him.
I love the muck and the gore though with Bagsack, because I love it. I would hit those chapters and it's like, I'm gonna fanboy gush. Murphy, get ready. Go. Go. Okay. I love those chapters because thematically it's so perfect, right? Like we have this character that we're set up not to really be all in on, but by the time you strip him down to his base humanity and drag him through the muck and the gore, then you start to rebuild him. Then thematically, you start to think spiritually on some level, like, what if I could have just skipped some steps and seen worth in this character before this had to happen to him for me to see worth in this character? Thematically, it's so important. That journey is so important. What if I could start to learn to see myself and humanity and others before they have to go through all these debasing steps?
Let me philosophize with you, John, but then also think about how much we learn when we throw ourselves in the gutter. Like when we put ourselves through the hardest life lessons, that's when we're going through the fire is oftentimes when we grow the most as a human.
That's absolutely true, and that's why he is the Raven, and that's why we sign up for it over and over again. We get to experience everything, the debasement, the glory, the triumph, the tragedy in this physical realm, and that's why we sign up every time. It's glorious.
And Bagsack has value. You know, he in and of himself has value, but of course, Saren never would have learned how to get to Dayraven without Bagsack.
So when I was reading Bagsack's chapters, when he is in the muck and the gore and escaping the prison with the chamber pot and all of that, I was pretty moved by that, honestly, because as gross as it was, because
chamber pot really affected you.
It was really gross. I couldn't eat while reading your book sometimes, Philip, but I did appreciate, because I appreciated knowing you as the author in a way when reading that, because I felt like the way you wrote about him, and you have to hear me out with what I'm going to say. I felt like you wrote about him in a way that seemed very animalistic. And at the same time, we as humans are animals, right? But I didn't feel like you were doing it in a way that you were trying to show that he was worthless. It was more like he was going through this horrific treatment, almost like an abused animal or abused dog. That was the idea that came to my mind. And it actually pulled at my heartstrings a bit to think about
Oh,
him.
absolutely. Yes.
Like I think I even I told you that at one point. I'm like, you actually got me to feel for Bagsack. And I didn't. I mean, reading the first 2 books, I wouldn't have thought I would have felt that way about that character.
We get a glimpse of his childhood as well, which he was bullied by Edulf, and we didn't know that about him in The Way of Edan, and you find out that about him in this book, even before the gift is wrenched from him. You find out, oh, actually, maybe he's not a nice person, but he was also treated awfully when he was young, and I think that's a challenge that many writers really kind of enjoy, is introducing a character that readers are just going to dislike, and then creating a sense of, oh, okay, now I understand where that character is coming from. I tried to do that with Bloodlove, even to some degree in the first book. And so it was a challenge in a way to myself as well, because I didn't like Bagsack all that much either. I was, I made fun of him a lot in the first book.
That's why you named him Bagsack.
Yeah, I mean, I named him Bagsack. Yeah. So.
No mother would name a child Bagsack.
It's just so cruel.
Yeah.
I tried to get Alan to name his kid Bagsack.
You were calling him Bagsack for a while.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I love Sakura. She was my favorite from book 1. I love how hard she has worked for everything that she has, how hard she worked to hone her abilities and to become this incredible leader, how she had this tension between, Dayrhaven and leading her people, and ultimately always trying to choose what's best, despite what it costs her. I love seeing her in battle and in leadership. And even, I think, dealing with PTSD, there was one line that really struck me in this book when she said that she was more afraid of killing again than she was of death, which I thought was just a really fantastic depiction of someone having to be in war, but it's not, no one's having a good time here, but we still have to make these decisions. We don't get to opt out of it. All loved it so much. Also, even though Sakura is my favorite character, she's also one of my biggest complaints about the book. So the reason is because I love her as a leader. I would have loved to see more of her in leadership. So like when she leaves, who's in charge? Who are the council members that surround her? The plot line about her being wanting to be with Dayrhaven, but she can't because the leaders, the queens, they can't have husbands and children. And then she gets pregnant, and then she's advised, just change the rules. And then I'm like, okay, cool. What are the repercussions? Like, if this is tradition, then what does it mean for her to change the rules? Will the people uprise? Will people agree to that? Like, I wanted to see the ripples in her kingdom. And then she didn't even tell anyone she was pregnant. And so then once all this is over, and then she's like, by the way, I'm pregnant, then we can't just change the rules now. We're not in the middle of war. No one's going to agree to that at this point. Like, I have so many things. I want to see the kingdom respond to her more.
You're gonna probably
really love the next book.
Love the next book.
That's such an author answer. My one big complaint. Great, read the sequel.
I'm writing about all this right now.
Okay.
I'm in the middle of this. Actually, I'm revising it. It's a finished story, but I'm just every point you're making, I'm like, yeah, that's in While Darkness Gathers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have liked more of that in this book.
I agree.
Too,
I think it needed to be here more.
Yeah. Because one of the main reasons why, Philip, is because I know you're a medievalist, so you're a specialist when it comes to medieval culture and feudalism, and that comes through in a lot of what's set up in the kingdoms and the warring factions and everything. But Sakura's kingdom of Astrolad is so special in this series that is very medieval. It's what brings in, I guess, the Buddhist Eastern aspects to the series. But how often do we get a queendom in epic adult fantasy? And it's like, well, I want that explored more. What are the repercussions of her changing the rules? What is there a precedent? Has there ever been a queen before who's gotten pregnant? What is it like with her people there? What I did it was I loved the whole concept of Astrolad. I would have loved so much more with that, and just more Sakura in general because I really love that character.
Mhm.
Good. I like that. You want more of her. I'll try to give you more.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, sure. She's my favorite character in the whole series as well. I think she's super fascinating. A lot of the things that I really found interesting with her were her balancing act. So, like, you have her wanting to be this strong, powerful leader, and we get to see her do that, and that's powerful with her magic and just like being a strong leader in itself. But then you have like, okay, she's going to become a mother. That softer side she shares with Dayraven. This like back and forth of like trying to have two identities and how do you make those two things come together. I thought was just super fascinating, and how she tried to balance them, and like I would have liked to see the repercussions as well. So it sounds like we'll get that at some point. But seeing how that would go forward, and just these like internal battles, because I think, you know, it's pretty normal for you to yearn maybe for one thing, but know that you need to do something else, right? Like I want to go after my dream job, but I know I need to support my family, and have those like inner conflicts in each other. And this is like on a grand scale of like, I'm this magical queen of this entire country, but I also am going to be a mom, and I have this person I love, and I want to do all these things together. I found all that very, very interesting. Also, the part of her when she is doing all the fighting and everything, at first it's all that rage and anger and everything. And might sound a little strange, but I related to that when I first started working out. Like, that was like such an outlet for rage and anger and everything. And as I've continued that journey, I've realized that that's not the best way to do it. You're not going to see the best results. You're not going to have your best performances by that. And so as she starts to realize like this rage and anger isn't the best way to do things, and how she feels so bad afterwards, like Merphy said, she'd rather die than keep doing it through like revenge and anger and everything. I related to that as I've gotten older and become more of a calm person with my exercise, because it can be such a animalistic, like, especially the culture in a gym can be very macho and over the top and everything. I related so much because I'm not really that person anymore. And so I related to her coming down from that like mountain peak down to being more of a normal person again. I really related to that.
Oh, I love that.
It's really
Yeah.
cool. You might like to, I'll just throw out a little tidbit about the special edition that the Broken Binding is doing of The Way of Edan right now. I was told that they asked me if I wanted to have little, at the beginning of every chapter, little illustrations. And for the Sakura chapters, I asked them to have a hibiscus flower with swords, curved swords that are crossed, so the hibiscus flower in the middle, to symbolize her conflict of, she sees herself as a healer, but in order to serve this role, to do her duty, she has to become a warrior. And there's that dual aspect of her that she's wrestling with the entire series, really, and how to balance that. And she does so with such grace, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so
something
glad.
I really loved about her, especially with the especially from book one specifically, was how we learned so much that her gift, her ability with her gift, so much of it came from working with her mind, learning to find a state of equanimity. And she's trained so hard her whole life. I kind of kept feeling like Damon's going to be fine. Which I do, I guess he did die in the end, but you know, like with the and he saved the day. But with Sakura, I really felt she's been this leadership position where she has to lead, but she has to fight, but she's a healer. It just was so much conflict, so much internal conflict.
I love Sakura as well, and I think that your daughters should be extremely proud of you for the female characters and the strength that they have in this series. I mean, I know you're a medievalist would know that world was not kind to women and children, and like we talked, without Serene's grit and determination and loyalty, there is no happy ending. Without Sakura, she really holds so much of this together, from grabbing Dayraven by by the shirt and training him to maybe he can have any kind of effect on humanity. Her as a leader, and then I'm so excited to look what's coming forward, because after this dichotomy she has to fight with, to be a leader and to be and what she wants to be as a healer, and then as she starts to put herself back together and be a country's leader and be a matriarch and a mother at the same time, what fertile ground for drama! I think that is just so rife for an amazing story. So I'm very happy that's coming.
Good. Yeah.
I'm excited that you're about to start Dandelion Dynasty as well, because I think that's a series that handles the ripples in society for every change that happens and changing traditions so well. So I'm excited to see you read that while you're writing this as well. It'll be cool.
I loved, like I said, the last 2 chapters of this book so much. I'm going to go ahead and jump here. We can jump back, though, to I'm always non-linear in my discussions, just so you all know. But I really, really I felt for her so much in the final chapter. So first of all, I'll just say that, the penultimate chapter, the second to the last chapter, I personally loved that whole chapter so much. The way that during that battle scene, I'm not usually the biggest battle scene type of reader, but at the same time, I loved that battle scene because I thought that it was such a great intersection of so many different characters that have been in different places throughout the entire book. And I could tell, by the way, Philip, that you very purposefully had a lot of chapters where there were battle scenes, and we switched from one side to show the perspective of one side, and then switched to the other side and tried to see, 2 sides of the same conflict and how sort of futile it was. And at the end, I really loved that you had people who were maybe on opposite sides at one point, like
Ludicon.
Thank you, Ludicon and Munzil, and yet they were fighting alongside each other, and Elfwe and Sequara and Yorn and Orvindil and Galador and Abon, all of these different characters who were fighting, and several of them die. And I feel like it flowed really well. There was just a really great flow to the action there, great intersection and showing all these characters. And then in the aftermath of everything, and then with the great scene with Day Raven and the Ghost Raven and all of that, which I love. I love your otherworldly writing style. That's my favorite type of part of the Edan trilogy. But specifically the aftermath with Sequara, how she recognizes that Day Raven is not there, that he left his body. And rather than go into a moment of grieving, she holds on a little longer, and she's fatigued, she's exhausted, and she chooses to heal Njorn.
Yes.
Like, that choice was so powerful. The fact that she chose to heal in a moment where she's so fatigued, she's lost so much, and it's almost like that feels good to her. Like, I could heal something in this moment. I can't do anything. I can't even rest. I can't even grieve right now because it's so overwhelming. But this little thing, this little gesture I can do is the one thing that I think might make me feel the tiniest fragment better than how I feel right now.
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked up that. That's where I was trying to go, and you said it beautifully. So yeah. Yeah.
I have more to say about the last chapter too, but I want to go ahead and allow others to respond too if they have any thoughts about Sequara. Any other things that you all wanted to say about Sequara?
Tom, I don't think you've talked about her. No, you did. You
No,
said
I did. I don't. Yeah.
Too. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if I have much more. Like you said, getting to see her heal, especially because it felt like for so long she just was like destruction, destroying, having to do what she had to do to kind of get back to what she feels is her. I don't know if it's her only purpose, but like a purpose that she feels very connected to. It is really nice to like have that kind of come back around, and it's almost like, okay, we're at the end, but it's a new beginning for her coming forward, getting back to what she would probably rather be doing.
And bringing, and this will be the last chapter, but bringing Saren to Imhar is another act of healing that she embarks on as well. So
Yes, I love that. Go ahead, Murphy.
Go ahead,
John.
Go ahead, Murphy.
Go ahead.
I just want to echo you, Joe. I really loved how you handled the battle scenes through the entire book here. And it was such an amazing pushing and pulling focus. We would have pulled all the way out to see like the chaos and the cacophony, and then in moments you would push into certain people on either side, so you could start to see the individual and the cost that it takes on individuals, and then you would pull back out. And that bit of lensing, pushing in and out during those battle scenes, I thought it kept just such a frantic, emotional, heightened sense.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. It's tricky. Battle scenes are tricky because people think they like them more than they really do, I think. So I often feel the more interesting thing is before and after, rather than during. But there needs to be some during, I think. And it just, people's tastes will vary as to how much of that they can tolerate. But hopefully it hits the right balance for some readers at least. But yeah. I was pleased with the way they came out, and there's a lot in here where I would really start with the aftermath, and then you'd figure out, okay, this was just a horrible battle, because I realized I could easily have way too much of this in here, and it probably is too much for some people, but but it is a world in a state of chaos. And as we emphasized from the beginning, what I was trying to explore here is what happens after, Hero gives everything and sacrifices it all. And he doesn't just, and Dayraven doesn't just go back to, okay, everything's great now. And I can go back to my life, and people don't just start singing songs and everything is miraculously healed, so. It's definitely a world of in suffering and pain. Yeah.
Oh, and I love the bittersweet ending. So the last chapter, the reason why it's one of my favorites is because I really think it just really hits those bittersweet tones so well, especially because I want to say I love that you delayed Sakura's grief, because I think that's realistic too. I think sometimes when so much tragedy happens all at once, I mean, everyone grieves differently, and it's perfectly okay if some people just right on the spot just break down and cry. That could be normal for some people. For other people, it might be normal not to have an immediate response or reaction. And so for Sakura, in Sakura's case, especially because she's someone who always feels like she has to be so strong and so grounded and so focused on other people, and of course takes that moment to heal Njorn, I loved that she lost control in that moment when she's leaving the mark. I love that it wasn't at the most convenient time. The marksmen had to look away, like they felt kind of uncomfortable. It could have been an almost embarrassing moment, but they of course felt what she was feeling, and they were like sad in their own private way. And then the others around her put a hand on her shoulder, and then they cried with her. But I loved that so much. I think I needed that. Like I needed her to just sob. I needed her to feel that. Especially because there have been a lot of deaths in this book, but there hasn't been a lot of time, understandably, because a lot of things have been happening, to stop and really process and grieve. And so I love that she had that moment before going on to do what she did for Saren. And I also want to say, with her intersection with Saren, I'll be honest, the first intersection with Saren, when she first met Saren, I did have a moment when I thought, this feels a little bit like I'm at Disney and there's a little girl coming up to a Disney princess and saying, oh, it's so nice to meet you. You are so wonderful. Thank you for taking care of Dayraven. But it was very, very sweet. But the last chapter, their interactions with each other took it just swept my heart away. It was so beautiful. It was so touching. I truly loved that ending so much. I loved how it was kind of sad. Honestly, it was a little sad that Saren had to be taken away from Edgeleaf, especially as he had another daughter for her to play with.
Right.
I think that also added to the bittersweetness of it. But it was really sweet that she got to meet Ymar at the end. And even though Dayraven didn't deliver 100% on the promise that it would be his sister, right, I think that there was something beautiful that it came from his memories that led Saren to Ymar.
Yeah. Yeah, Dayraven is present there in that final meeting, I feel. Yeah.
Am I the only one who liked it better that it wasn't Imar's sister in the end. I liked that it was subverted and it wasn't exactly what they had talked about. I really enjoyed that
No, I like
it
that.
wasn't the sister, actually.
Liked that
I
too.
don't know. Yeah.
Because everything doesn't always pan out exactly how you think
Exactly.
it's going to or want it to.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But
I
there's
like
still-
there's a good chunk of the book. I'm like, what about this whole quest for the sister? Are we just going to drop that? Like, are we not going to have resolution on that? And then at the end, you know, you gave me a man tear. So, you know, fair play to you.
It was a tear, but it was a manly one.
It was a manly tear. It was the one single Denzel tear. One single, Merphy. One single.
I heard you were at work when that happened, John.
I was at work. I had to go into the back room. I was sneaking reading time at work. I had to go in the back room and splash my face.
Just be
But
like,
it was
I was
one. It was
crying,
one.
but,
It was
like, in a
one
cool
Denzel
way.
tear.
One Denzel tear.
Mm-hmm.
Aw.
Yeah. It sounds probably ridiculous, but it makes me cry too. And, I mean, I cry when I'm reading that scene myself. So yeah,
Aw.
yeah.
That was really well done. Such a good last chapter. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Tom. I love that it was subverted in that way.
Hmm.
And I think that's perfectly, and it was perfectly said, Murph, that, you know, things don't always pan out. So.
Yeah, and I think another thing that it doesn't pan out, but it still gets a little bit of a resolution. I don't know if it's in the second to last chapter, it's somewhere in that range, but when he meets his girlfriend from the beginning again, Day
Emma.
Raven does. Yes, when
Yes!
that reunion happened, that was fantastic as well. Once again, it's the if it were like a very traditional following tropes, they would have probably gotten back together somewhere along the line or something.
Mhm.
But seeing like where each of them are and just like all of that, I was so glad that there was a reunion of them because I wasn't sure if that was ever going to happen, and I think it was great that it did happen. Absolutely, yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked for you. It was definitely a big part of the whole full circle aspect of this.
Yeah, going back to the mark, seeing her, yeah, all of that coming, yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And her husband standing up in council
Yes.
for them. You know,
Yeah.
so
At her
all of
bidding.
this,
At her bidding.
Yeah.
all of this affirming that there is life, affirming there is a future, there is beauty in the world to move forward into, as opposed to what could have been played as pettiness in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting, this was one of the aspects of the book that I wasn't sure was going to work. And I actually had conversations with AP, my AP Kahneman, my developmental editor, about this whole thing, because I think for many people, it would feel like, oh, wait, wasn't this thing supposed to end in Torhelm? You know, that would be maybe the more logical place for this to all end. But then we had this sort of appendage. We go off to the mark to end things. But it was just ultimately I decided to keep it that way because it was very important to me to have these full circle moments, such as Day Raven meeting Ebba and having him go back to where it all began in the Forest of the Mark, and bringing all those characters together in the convergence, if I can steal that term. So yeah, it just felt important enough to me, even if it didn't come across as smooth necessarily. And I don't know how it felt to you guys, but it was important enough for me that it overrode any other considerations, that I was going to just stick to that vision. And I think I'm glad I did. So
I definitely questioned it at the time because it did feel like it should have ended, but how it ended up working out, it was great. So
kind of a scouring of the Shire, I guess.
Yes, a little bit. Yeah, it does give those vibes a little bit. But yeah, it did feel like it should have ended, and then we kind of kept going. But because of what happens in the end, I think it ends up working out really well.
Yeah, I love the structure of it coming all the way around in the arc, and that one beautiful moment it's going to live with me for a long time. When they were back at the crossroads, and that you got that Robert Frost moment of, man, if I'd have turned that way. I don't know. Echoes of Robert Frost for me. I really dug that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then that whole crossroads business. I mean, that goes back to a chapter in the first book. It's called At the Crossroads, and that's where Day Raven meets Gnorn and Hlock, and it's a point of change where the narrative kind of twists in a different way from what I think people probably were expecting to happen. You know, they were on their way to the wizard Galdor, and he doesn't show up until book 2. You know, and he's another death that I felt awful about at the end of this one, having Galdor pass away, but it just felt right to me, I guess. in that moment. Yeah.
I actually kind of appreciated that people died at the end, like, not in a
Yeah.
morbid way, but just because we had already touched on the fact that death is not a bad thing, like with,
Yeah.
Yoramon, and it's realistic. I mean, you
Yeah.
always talk about that when as a medievalist,
Yeah.
that part of the medieval sentiment is understanding that life is short, that we're here for a limited time, let's make the most of the time that we're here, and understand that we do have to let go.
Yep. That's right. That's a big part of what I was exploring in here. Yeah.
But at the same time, it is tragic because, you know, Sequara and her baby are now left without Dayraven. So there is that, you know, yeah, this is part of life, and he lived a good life, he lived a purposeful life, but also, you know, this child is going to wish that she could have met him.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But that child is a great story waiting to happen.
True.
Yeah. Well, late this year, early next, I think.
Do you have a title for that yet?
Wild Darkness Gathers. Is the title. And it might sound a bit ominous, but it's more about what we do while darkness is gathering. So I hope it in the end will feel more affirmative than anything.
The child's name is Darkness. We're going edgy. He's going to be an assassin.
I think you will appreciate
Night Raven.
Night Raven.
You'll appreciate the child's name when you find out what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's Merphy.
If it's not, it should be.
That's right.
Watch him choose like a One Piece name.
Yes, I named her Luffy. Yeah.
Lufina, you know, whatever.
Lufina, yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts anyone wants to share?
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you to you, Joanna, for organizing this and being such a gracious host and putting it all together. And I want to thank all of you for reading this trilogy. It's kind of, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's my life's work because I did spend 20 years producing it and putting it out in the world. And even 20 years before that, dreaming about doing it and pursuing an education that I felt would equip me to pull this off. So it's been a long dream of mine to have readers like you guys. So I'm deeply appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great series. Glad I read it. Looking forward to the next one for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Get to work. I mean, I know it's working this many years on something and writing is a very lonely, singular medium, I'm sure sometimes. But, as a reader, story can change the world, and you absolutely changed mine, and I thank you for that.
Beautiful.
What a note. Boy, John.
Great. And I guess that's it. Merphy, did you want to say anything? Any final thoughts? Or
Thank you for joining us, Philip, and thank you for letting us read your story. It's
Yeah.
been cool to see a little bit more into your mind and your perspective through what you've put on page.
yeah.
Bagsack specifically, I feel like I know you a lot better.
Yeah, we didn't know that was rattling around up there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I want to thank my lovely guests here, and I want to thank Philip Chase. I'm so grateful to honor my great friend here. Congratulations on completing your first epic fantasy series, and I'm just so grateful to get to host this celebratory discussion with you present. And again, thank you all for watching. Appreciate you all so much. All the channels here will be linked in the description below. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.